Welcome. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second day of this summit. Thank you for showing up today for yourself and for everyone. I'm Kalisha. I'm a minister and pastoral counselor of the Web of Life, and I'm also Quinn's co-host. If you haven't already done so, please name yourself, what you want to be called here tonight, and anything else you want people to know about you, like pronouns, pronunciations, zodiac signs. Just if you need help, there's three dots on the top of your picture, and that should allow you to rename. If you're connected to the United States or Turtle Island, as called by the Indigenous ancestors, at the time of this live session, we just honored Indigenous Peoples Day. And in keeping that spirit going today and forever, let's acknowledge and honor the people that came before us on our land. So in the chat, please share what tribal land you are joining us from today. You can find that at native-land.ca. Take a moment to silently acknowledge and honor the land and the indigenous peoples of the land in which you reside. Also, let's give grace to any imperfections tonight, because perfectionism does not live in this space. Let's put aside the judgments we place on the expectations of others and of ourselves. I'd also like to remind you that this summit is a showcase of the Web of Life Ministers' gifts. There's no expectation that you will like or agree with each minister's offerings, so take what you can use and put aside what you can't. We're not here to make you believe anything you don't feel comfortable with. At the very least, we just want to introduce concepts for you to ponder. But if you do find yourself feeling uncomfortable or struggling with anything that is shared, we invite you to just notice this for yourself. Now I'm going to turn it over to Quinn.
So now I am very happy to introduce Desiree, Narda, and Gisela. Hi, everyone, all three of you. Great to see you. And also Karlyn, who is the guest moderator. And so perspectives, Black, Indigenous Women of Color, perspectives. And so we are graced with your presence to be able to share what you feel called to share. And whatever that is fantastic in my book, because I care for all of you very deeply.
Welcome to BIWOC Perspectives, Black, Indigenous Women of Color, Perspectives, Identity, Responsibility, and Transition, navigating the layers of identity, responsibility, and transition. So we're going to do some grounding, and I had like a simple grounding kind of plan for us, and then I was like, you know what, just add a little razzle dazzle. Let's connect to earth elements too. So Desiree Hammond, she, her pronouns, and we're just going to start by just dropping into our bodies. We'll just start off by taking a moment to look around your space and just kind of let your eyes fall on 5 things in your space, just kind of telling yourself what it is you're looking at as you're looking at it. And simultaneously, if that's not available to you, you can also just drop into sensation. So notice temperature. Notice sound, including the sound of my voice. Notice what feels warm or cool. Notice the textures, maybe of your clothing against your skin. Some very simple ways to drop into our surroundings. Maybe there's a little bit of movement in your body naturally. And then just start to bring your attention now to your breath. So maybe closing your eyes or softening your gaze. And just taking a conscious deep breath in and a really present deep breath out. And letting each inhale and exhale feel slow, delicious, and deliberate. Slow, delicious, and deliberate. Deep breath in through the nose. And then exhale through the mouth. And then start to gather up your breath from your low belly. Maybe you place a hand there, like low belly, breathing. And just notice the expansion and contraction of your body as you breathe. So maybe you notice that your belly rises as you inhale. And then it gets a little softer, falls towards your spine as you exhale. And the good news is that there's no right or wrong way to breathe, right? So if you notice your mind coming up with thoughts of whether you're doing it correctly, you can just let that go. No right or wrong way. And then let yourself arrive in your seat. So now starting to connect to the ground beneath you. And to practice grounding is to practice your body in relation to earth. And so see if you can just start to imagine earth energy. Maybe you just bring to mind like a patch of grass, or you start to think about how the seat that you're sitting on is connected to the ground, that's connected to the earth. Noticing your body in relation to the earth. And just notice how that shifts how you feel in your body. Maybe you start to settle down, or your breath gets a little slower. Just giving yourself a permission to arrive more fully in this moment. And then start to connect to water. So see if you can just imagine your breath as waves of water. So just riding the wave of your inhale and your exhale. And just embodying water here. So maybe like imagining just a body of water, or maybe you start to kind of shift and flow side to side like water, just kind of taking on the element of water. How do I breathe? How do I sit? Embodying the element of water. And then from this place here, now that we've connected to our breath for a few minutes, we're going to bring in the fire element. So from this grounded place of a bit more clarity, maybe a bit more connection to what is with the body, we're going to bring in the fire element. So I'm going to ask you this question of what are you longing to embody right now? And maybe you start to feel sensations in your body. Like when I say longing to embody, I feel kind of like some sensation around my belly. Maybe you start to notice your heart beat a little faster. Just like, what am I longing to embody? Maybe it's a word, maybe it's a picture, maybe it's a sentence. But whatever that first thought was, let's stick with that. So using fire element to kind of stir up energy. What are we longing to embody? And then we're going to imagine whatever that thing is if it's a picture, a word, a sentence, an image, a scenario, whatever that is, we're going to bring it to the top right above the head. So just imagine that word, that energy, that picture, whatever it is right above your head. And we're going to turn that image or word into a ball of light. And I want you to imagine poking a hole through that ball of light and just let that kind of disintegrate into the air. So we're bringing in air now. And see if you can just allow like the particles to kind of float around of whatever that is. Start to kind of surround yourself in whatever that is, kind of like air. So now it becomes the air that we're breathing. Maybe it's sprinkling down upon us, or it's sinking into our pores. And we can just sit in it. We don't have to take action. We don't have to become anything. We don't have to do anything. We just kind of sit in that energy of what we're longing to embody. And so with that, we're just going to kind of swim in that for the next hour. And we'll come back to it at the end of this panel. So now just kind of coming back to space, maybe opening your eyes, taking a look around your space. And then start to return to virtual space. So I'm going to bring in Karlyn now to lead the way.
Thank you so much for that grounding. That was wonderful. I feel very in the space, ready for this beautiful conversation that we are about to have with each other and with the community. So hi, everyone. My name is Karlyn. I use they, them pronouns, and I am going to be the guest moderator for this evening's conversation. I'm very excited to be here in this space with y'all and to be in conversation with these wonderful folks. So I will start with Desiree, then we're going to go with Narda, and then Gisela, you're going to close us out with intros.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Desiree Hammond. I just participated in a Afrofuturist exercise workshop on Saturday, and we had to come up with our superhero name. And the name is Soma. So I'm bringing Soma into the space tonight. And let's see, I'm a yoga instructor, somatic practitioner, a minister, a pleasure activist, and yeah, that is what I do. I have some nonprofit experience, but really my mission is to lift the vibration of humanity. So whatever that looks like in any given moment is what really centers me, and that's my compass. So I'll pass it to the next person now. Narda?
Hola, my name is Narda, and it's an honor to be with you. It's an honor to be part of this panel. I am also a minister to the Web of Life. I also do grief and trauma work. I also offer just healing in my community, as as I'm asked to step into spaces. An organizer and also pleasure activist like Desiree, to be able to just really share whatever, everything I've learned. And I'm really excited to be here today.
And I'm Gisela, she, her pronouns. I too am a minister. This is not a surprise at this point in our introductions. And a writer, a filmmaker. I also provide healing, I would say, guiding ceremonies and circles, including having hosted a circle, a BIWOC only circle with Desiree for quite a while. That was a really amazing experience. And I am also super excited and honored to be in this space and excited for this conversation, because when we all started talking about it, what we really wanted to provide was in spaces that are so usually and so predominantly white, a space for a conversation between other voices and where other voices are centered. So anytime that we get to do that, that's exciting. And anytime that we're in Karlyn's capable hands, that's exciting too.
All right, thank you so much for those introductions. So let us get into the conversation, the meat and the potatoes. And it can be vegan meat if you're a vegan person, because we are inclusive in this space. So I think the first thing that I know that I am curious about, and I think that would be really helpful to share, is like talking just a little bit about like animism and like what it is, and then also what drew you to it, because I think that will be really helpful for folks in the audience. And I also know that I am curious myself. As the moderator, I'm also being nosy. So tell us about it. What is it? What drew you to it? What about the practice where you were like, yes, this resonates with me, this clicks? Please share.
Yeah, so for me, I think it was just a natural fit. I think that just to be, I was going to say it was like my personality to always have this connection to earth. I started my spiritual journey. We're going to talk about religion and spirituality later, I think, but I would say like the spirituality for me began, like this intentional journey of spirituality began at a very young age. I was probably maybe like 13, 12, somewhere around there. And when I was still figuring things out and learning, I was always looking to nature as a guide, as a place of solace, as a place of connection. And to me, it's like, how can we arrive at like at our highest vibration without acknowledging or being in connection to or in relationship with the earth around us, And so I think it's just this acknowledgement of, it's just fact for me. And so that it's this acknowledgement of the interconnectedness of all of us. So yeah, it's like fact, like, oh yeah. And then I think having the language for it too, right? Of like learning this term when Web of Life really started to kind of merge with this idea of animism, and then this animism ministers training. Then I was introduced to that word, and I said, oh, so that's what that thing of connecting to earth and honoring all that is in the earth, on the earth, of the earth, all beings. That's called animism? Okay, well then we have a word for it.
Yeah, I'm totally feeling that. For me, I think it's just this knowing. It's in my bones. I feel like just memory, this memory. And even as a child, I recall just the water and the smells of the flowers in my grandma's garden, and always wanting to be outside and always looking up to my elders, who worked with plants, who gardened, who grew food, and things like that. And so it was just this, something so natural. And then feeling a pull away from that at a certain age, and then coming back to it again with this, just like, and like you said, like the language. And it's just this aha moment, right? When you can really say, oh, that's what it is. And for me personally, anima means like just everything, it's everything that lives and breathes, and it's just, part of the part of the source, part of this everything we see. And so just to be able to name that, and I had been feeling a little a few years ago, before I started on this journey, was just feeling disconnected and feeling like I was missing something. And so when I met Quinn and I came to the Web of Life, and again, when I was able to name it, it just felt so perfect. And I remember having a dream, like probably days before I came to the Web of Life, of like, it's just, you'll find what you're looking for. And it was, I found it. And it's just been amazing for me.
It's really interesting to sort of see the parallels and the shared experiences, because just like Desiree and Narda, for me it was intuitive. Like it just felt like the way that I related to the world from childhood. And even though I grew up in a very like industrial urban community, those like my grandmother's tiny garden in our backyard, and the tree that was like growing out of the sidewalk in the front, like I talked to them, like, that was a place of solace. They felt like other beings that I could talk to and turn to. And so I think that, and also growing up in a family that sort of accepted the existence of magic and the unseen in the world, just culturally. As both my parents are immigrants from South America, but my mother's side is also Swana. And before I get the WTF, Swana is a decolonial term for Middle Eastern. So it refers to indigenous people of Southwest Asia and North Africa. And my mother's is Swana. And so there were these stories that got passed down, or weird little practices. There was like a little blue eye in every room to ward off mal de ojo. And so I think that also fostered a sense of like, well, maybe this, even though I still felt shame around this sort of intuitive connection, this intuitive animism, it still felt, maybe that sort of fostered it a little bit. And I know that I was in denial for a long time about it, tried to fit this feeling into other boxes, but there was nothing that felt right. And then discovering that term again, animism, there I can name this thing. And since then it's been a practice my practice has sort of evolved to incorporate the intuitive and the ancestral, where I've learned that from my family, and also where it's been lost to my family. And I've had to do the research and the study to try to learn it again. So it is a complicated and layered journey, coming back to the title of our panel. Yeah, that is how I found my way to it.
So yeah, I would love to hear about y'all's journeys into your spirituality and your spiritual practices, and what that has looked like.
My grandfather on the Swana side had this divination practice, and he would look into pools of water and he would see things, and his grandmother forbade that he do, and not his grandmother, it would have been his mother. His mother forbade him to do it because that's not a Christian thing, and Armenians are very Christian people. normal. And so he had to put that aside and then save it and then teach, once he was an adult and he didn't have to worry so much about his mother's approval, he taught my mom to do it. But it was in this way of like, oh, this is just a thing that you do. It was downplaying that importance. And I think it's because there is that internalized shame, that internalized sense, for all that he was very open-minded, that I shouldn't be doing this. And in my family, I saw that so much, like this, the sort of like the syncretizing that happens, that I think is so common in Latin America too, where you have this coexistence of like, these are the acceptable things. We don't do the other witchcraft shit. But then you go home and there is, the blue evil eye to ward things off. There's like the time that your grandmother, decides that you have to make a mark in blood on your door to like, things have been going badly for a while, so we have to change things up now. Oh, sorry, you're muted.
I would say the Guadalupe candles. Like there's all of these things where you're like, where your family is like, we don't do that stuff, but let's pray about this sickness, that let's pray to ward off evil. And it's like, we are literally casting spells. Like,
yes, exactly. You're doing like this mental gymnastics so that you're not like breaking the mold that colonialism put you into.
yes.
But it's incongruous. Like it doesn't fit together. And so living with that is, and like sort of detangling that and figuring out your own path in the midst of that is really challenging. And I think another piece that, especially as BIPOC people, I mean, there's so much information we don't have access to from our own families, so much that's taken away that a lot of people don't have to think about. They can trace their families back many generations. They know they know the words for things. And for us, it's always this sort of broken, or so often this broken path, and trying to get this little bit here and you hit this dead end. And then, so it's been really challenging to detangle that and then like sort of weave something new from it. Now that you were totally nodding, there was something.
Yeah,
there.
I can totally relate to that. My mother said that when I was about to enter the world, she heard me crying. And she could hear this crying within her, and she kept telling her sister, "Do you hear that? She's crying." And so I remember she told me this story, and somebody in her community told her, that's something that, your daughter's gonna have a gift, and like it's believed that maybe you like heard her coming from like another space and time, And so I remember like hearing those stories and trying, like having questions, but then those questions being like, no, we don't talk about that, or, we don't, I had dreams of things, or I would say it's raining, it's going to rain. I was 3-4 years old, and, they would look at me like, they still have stories of seeing me and wanting to go like baptize me and go like, do these things, because they couldn't really understand. They knew these things were inherent, but they were trying so hard to fight against it. I think my grandmother struggled a lot with that, of being Catholic, but she would also, now that I think about the way she practiced, I saw her practicing animism all the time, and so it was very conflicting and very confusing for me. And so it wasn't until I now, that I'm able to really like have perspective, and see that. But I feel that. Just disconnection.
Are we moving into the spirituality versus religion conversation? Because I feel like we're talking about that. So I was raised Catholic. My Nana is do they say devout Catholic, like very, very devoted to Catholicism. But yet, like the superstitions that ran and like that my nanas would talk about, all my nanas, like the little things that they would do or believe in. Like I remember my great nana, my great nana told my nana when she was pregnant and there was an eclipse to carry a safety pin in her pocket. So there was like little things that like they did, And then little rituals, I later realized were rituals. My Nana has a nicho outside in her backyard, and she lights candles for people. She would heal people with her hands, like before I even knew about Reiki or any of that. And I remember feeling the healing, like just that feeling of my Nana's hand like this on my face, like when I wasn't feeling well. So, and the warmth, from her hands. So it's, and she is a healer, but never really like publicized that or like talked a lot about that, and always related everything back to like the saints and Jesus and God. And so I was raised Catholic, and then I remember in like third grade starting to ask these like bigger questions that the church could not answer. And one of the greatest things, I have an interesting relationship with my parents, but one of the things that I'm really grateful that my mom did is when I started asking those questions, she did not rein me in and prevent me from looking at like finding my answers for myself. And I think she really believed, like, she wanted me to do my own she actually told me, you do your own investigation of your truth. And so I did. And so I remember like being homeschooled in middle school, and it kind of like, I look back on it like I was unschooled, but whatever I was passionate about or wanted to learn about, she let me dive in. So I remember researching like Hinduism and Buddhism and Christianity versus the Catholic religion. And I got my first angel deck when I was 13 years old, and I was giving readings and like talking to people on the other side as a child. And I remember like at a very early age also starting to feel exploited because everybody in my family wanted me to give them a reading, and having no understanding of spiritual boundaries. So it's been a journey. And I think that the thing that's ringing true in my mind of like the difference between spirituality and religion, and how I've danced with that throughout my life, is that spirituality to me is just like a fact and a way of life. As I said, like synonymous with animism, it's like the interconnectedness of everything, which I think we need that to find liberation. And so it's the interconnected, it's this acknowledgement of the interconnectedness. And then religion feels like this sort of man-made thing that is our effort, human nature, to find a grasping. Buddhism talks about like grasping, right? Wanting to grasp at like the impermanence or the thing that's just within us. And I think that's just our human nature attempt to try and box something to make us feel better about ourselves, or to find some safety in what is so expansive.
I like to think of spirituality as very personal, very, unique. And it's something that's so like full of infinite possibilities. And then I tend to think of religion as that like what you just described, Desiree, and also like an inherent way of like finding community in a sense, right? Like kind of like this belonging. And so, but it's also very like dictated, right? And so very like very, I don't know, just not as expansive, I feel, as my own spirituality.
And I think there's something to be said about having the freedom and the agency to be able to determine what your spirit, like what is your spirituality to you, and how do you get into right relationship with the thing that's bigger than ourselves. And to be able to have the freedom to do that that's a very liberating feeling for me. And I wish that for everyone.
That part there, I think, is so powerful, because the thing about religion, when I think about religion, is that it reinforces systems of hierarchy. It's reinforced, so it has been used as a tool of control, and a tool
of forgetting.
Forgetting all of these like the little practices that our abuelas were doing, that were like, I mean, they were acts of defiance. Like, for that to survive, for that to continue, is an act of defiance. And I think that that's what's so powerful about animism, about this way of engaging with something larger than ourselves. Like, it's not mediated by anybody else. It's not controlled. It's not going through a hierarchical system that tells us we can and can't do these other things, that has these echoes of the oppressive systems in our society. It is direct. It's unmediated. It's just us in reciprocal relationship with everything that we're connected to. And so that to me like feels liberating and revolutionary. How have you all navigated deciding or determining what is for you and what isn't?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a great question. Yeah.
With spirituality, I've learned that I'm connected to everything and that everything is me. And when I think about religion, especially in what we're seeing currently in that separation, um, war, right? And displacement and all these things that we see because of religion. Um, that's where I knew that I didn't fit in there anymore, that I knew that my spirit loves everything and that it wouldn't have any room for separation. And that's when I had that realization, I think is when I really felt spirit. And everything that I knew as a child and growing up was that.
How I've determined it for me, it's been a lot of what I do is like a lot of my rituals are actually very private. They're very like intuitively led. They'll come to me in like a dream, or I'll get just like something comes to my mind's eye that I'm like, this is what I need to practice. And then oftentimes like my affirmation that it was in fact a ritual, or that it was something that like my ancestors did, something will happen where my Nana will share a story about what my great great Nana did, or I'll read something about what like Chicanas did, or what like what my African ancestors, or something that ties back to something from in the past that I say, oh, okay, well that's a thing. Like, I mean, like one of the practices is like working with water and like blessing water and charging water and doing a lot of things with water that I'm like, I didn't realize till later that it was a lot of ritual going on, you know? But what I used to think even too was compulsive behavior as a child, or like things that I would do to try to keep myself safe. I didn't always have a safe childhood. I didn't always feel safe. And so little things that I would do that I thought were just like habits, or what was the first word I said? But yeah, like just little habits or like coping mechanisms were actually little rituals that I developed for myself that now have evolved into something more intentional. So I'm like, okay, like I knew what I was doing when I was little. Like I really, so it's an intuitive thing. And I think that the way I stay in right relationship with a lot of it is that it's like a deeply personal, like not for everyone that needs to know. And it's not something that I'm gonna get on a platform and share all the time. So I think like that's another thing that I kind of have to sit with, of like what's to share, and then what was just for me and my journey. And having that discernment is key. Like the spiritual journey also includes being very anchored in your physical body.
Mm-hmm.
So that like it kind of circles back to the discernment too. It's like we can't just be in the spiritual realm, and I don't think it's useful to just be in the body realm.
Yes.
But to be able to find the dance between the two and use your body or your breath as this like tool to navigate what's for me, what's not for me, what feels good, what doesn't feel good. When do I know when, like my body tells me when I'm needing routine or ritual. My
Yes.
body tells me when I need to ask for support. I firmly believe too, like, I don't know if y'all feel this way, but it's like my angels, my ancestors, my guides will not intervene without me asking for help. How
Yes.
respectful. Thank you. Thank you for having but sometimes I'm like, couldn't you have intervened like 10 hours ago?
They're like, yes, we
like
could have, but what would you have? But you wouldn't have learned the lesson if we did. Exactly. And the lesson is knowing when to ask for intervention, right?
I want for y'all to know that, speaking of like ritual and ceremony and intention, because I want us to also talk about like how we're weaving in this like spiritual religious practice and this connection with our bodies, while also like navigating the systems that we have to operate in order to survive. because we talked about religion causing this like forgetting experience, but then there's also these other systems of oppression that benefit by us being out of body, by us forgetting who we are, by us not being tapped in and turned on and tuned in our pleasure. And so how do we like, what does that look like to like be in ritual and to remember when there's all of these things telling us to forget? I'm curious what, oh, and sorry, that was what I was going to say. Everybody who's watching and listening, to know that the ceremony and intention began days ago. And I just feel like the intention of that, like anything can be ritual, in my opinion, anything can be sacred, anything can be somatic if we slow down enough and we weave in intention. How are we dancing between like the realities of life and all of these structures that are so hard to net, so harmful? And then how are we balancing that like restorative approach for ourselves?
Thank you, because something that was coming up for me was like total imposter syndrome. So the reality of those systems that have said no, you can't be in those spaces. Seeing the lack of
Mhm.
BIPOC spaces, just being like having that realization of where can I step in, is something that I've sat with for a long time. I think that has really kept me in a lot of ways from really stepping into what I would really want to do, and that's legit. Just like where I'm at. And I think it was something I was able to name in the past is like, I want to serve and I want to help, and I want to nurture and love and bring interdependency and interconnectedness into my community. And also it's exhausting because there's just so much that, is keeping me from that tires me out, that keeps me from really stepping into that. And I feel resentful a little bit in that sense. And I also have, like Desiree, like you said, like I feel guided, and I feel like I trust that guidance wholeheartedly. And that's in those moments when I'm able to tap in and be like, okay, I'm going to take some breaths. I'm going to do those affirmations. I'm going to sit outside and I'm just going to let, the information come through and the guidance come through. And also absolutely reaching out to you all, like we had tears, we were emotional because we don't have these spaces as much as we would want to. I don't feel safe in many other spaces, because I don't feel like I can be vulnerable, like I can be my authentic self, in many spaces. So yeah, it's a balance, I think, for me.
Thank you, Narda, for naming all of that. I feel like, yeah, it's exhausting. Something that came up for me while you were describing, in particular, the resentment, is this sense, the sense of heaviness, of weight, of like how much we carry. There is the weight of sort of facing these systems every day and all the ways that those systems try to dehumanize, to alienate us from ourselves. I mean, even this idea that there is this dichotomy, that we're spirit and body, that's imposed on us. There is no such division. Like, we are everything intertwined. We are all these things. These systems influence and affect each other. And I think there's the weight of that, facing those systems, having to actively work to keep yourself whole. And then, I mean, I don't want to presume to speak for everybody else, but I know for me, like a part of my experience that a lot of non-BIPOC people in my life can't relate to is the sense that I am never just myself. I am myself and the weight of all the hopes and dreams of my ancestors. I cannot just think about myself. Like, I think every day about all the miraculous shit that had to happen for me to even exist when my ancestors were trying to survive genocides. Like it's amazing to me, and I feel the weight of that, have felt the weight of that since I was a child. And what does that do to you to carry that weight? And to then confront a society that also does not see you as an individual. Like, I have never gotten to internally be that individual, but also I go into spaces and am a representative of people like me. And, you know, I am going to be tokenized in this space because, oh, well, I'm a minority, but I speak a certain way and I look a certain way. So like, oh yes, we want you to do this thing here, but I am not me. I am a representative and I carry that weight. And then feel like I have to excel in a completely different way because I am that representative and the embodiment of all the things my ancestors did not get to do. And while having that, like containing those multitudes, is sort of magical if you think about it. And while I do feel like, and that means they're all living with me all the time and guiding me. Also, my God, like that is really heavy and exhausting. And then you're navigating all the shit that happens to you in your life. You're carrying intergenerational trauma. You have it like in your bones, in your DNA, all the resilience, but also all the suffering. And I've done a lot of thinking about that in the past year, as like also a lot of just normal life things have happened that have been really challenging. Like, when do you break when you're holding all of this?
It's sometimes it is like the 10 minutes, or it's the 2 minutes that you're peeing, it's the 10 minutes that you're on a drive somewhere, it's the 5 minutes in between Zoom calls because you need to pay your bills. And I just want to say, like, that to me is that's the highest level of work, is to be so dedicated to yourself that you're like, I don't give a shit if I have 60 seconds, I'm going to take that breath.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take that second to reclaim, to remember, to make it sacred, to make it fucking matter, because it has to, because I matter.
And it is the, to bring in what Channing Nicholas said, it is the routines create spaciousness. And it is like that 2 minutes peeing in the bathroom, being your quiet time, like it adds up, right? It builds.
And we have to believe that matters too.
And it's hard to sometimes, right? Because you're like, 2 minutes isn't a long time, but like 2 minutes is still 2 minutes. And you will be surprised what spirit can do with you in 2 minutes. I got 7 grant reports due tomorrow. So this is all I got, right? They're going to be like, thank you. We see you. Here's a download. Keep going, right? And I think that we just have to be okay with, like, sometimes all we have is
part of the human experience.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you all for this nourishing conversation. So last week we talked about ancestors, and I heard a lot of that coming through today. But I also heard you all talk about, the inner knowing and these rituals and things that you all did, whether it came from your family or if just something that you're learning on your own. But I'm curious how much of it you might think is ancestral coming through for you.
Mm.
Sometimes it feels a little different. Like, I think that when I like to have discernment between like ancestral and spirit guide and angel, it's like, for me, I'll just say how I feel it in my body. It's like angelic feels very light and airy. Ancestral feels like knowingness, wise, been there, done that, like a heavier, like, this is fact, this is what it is. Angels are like, I'm here, like, sprinkle, sprinkle, like, it's an option, free will. And then my guides feel a little more dedicated. Like, that feels a little more like I'm saying what I'm saying, and I hope you're hearing me, because like big signs on the road, like guides give big signs. Angels kind of pass through, and then like my ancestors are like, we've been here, we know this, and like a lot of in the body, I feel it, like head to toe, because they've been in body. That's just somatically how I feel it. Anyone else?
It's probably just sort of my natural inclination to like take like a sort of more cerebral approach to things. I, like Karlyn, have a very hard time with certainty, like feeling certain about anything. And I have, been on a journey of like relearning how to listen to instinct, how to be in the body, how to not be always up here about everything. So that in the process of, so some of my, when we talk about sort of the ancestral, I think some of that for me has had to come from actual research, whether that's questioning family members who maybe weren't willing to talk about things before, but if I work on them, you know, I've done a lot of interviews, I can get it out of them. Or actually having to read things and do research to learn the things that have been forgotten, that have been stolen. But then as I've recovered my connection to my inner knowing, I feel like there is this confirmation of the ancestral. When I encounter it, there is this feeling of homecoming, or, you know, there's the universe smacking me over the head, like with signs, like, look here, this, be certain about this. So it's come with more embodiment and more connection or reconnection and reclaiming inner knowing.
But it's 8:01. I want to honor time and thank you everybody for being here, and thank you Karlyn for moderating. And it's just been such a joy to be here with you all.
Wow, thank you so much, all four of you, for having this very powerful and natural conversation. You all, yeah, it was great. Thank you. And the fact that you talked about animistic things, I'm like, oh, what an added benefit. What a wonder. So, Karlyn, so good to meet you, and thank you for being here. And Gisela, Narda, and Desiree, it's just a blessing to know you. And thank you for being open to this and saying yes. What an honor that you said yes. I'm grateful.
Thank you again for the opportunity. Bye, y'all.
Many blessings to all. Thank you for everyone
Gracias.
who's here live. Thank you. And
Thank
we
you
went
for
longer
everyone.
tonight
Yes,
because
thank you everyone
they
for
wanted more
staying.
time to talk and share with us. So it's a blessing to have been able to listen to these words.